I'll count us down here.
Okay, good.
And
Hello.
I can hear you.
Hello.
Gotta get all this stuff out. All right.
And we can be playful. I like to be
I know.
playful, by the way.
It's fine.
I'm a joker most of the time, so it's okay to be playful. And Cody, no. Go away. We cannot do this. No. Sit.
Can we start? Do you need to put him in the other room?
No, then he'll bark. Yes, I need dog therapy.
Apparently.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna start here and countdown in 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Timothy Winger, and I'm from themaneffect.com, and I'm excited to do a, video. What is it? Interview? I don't know.
Collaborative work interview.
Collaborative work, yeah.
Sure.
With Dr. Daniel P. David from menslifeinstitute.org. And we are creating and developing content to encourage men with practical parts of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just excited. The topic for today is therapy and just all that comes around that, and specifically for men, why we as men generally have a stigma around being in therapy and stuff like that. So
Right.
Yeah.
So today's topic to me is really important. Obviously, being a therapist, people would say, well, you would say that, but I think that in reality, our world, our society has, become a little bit more anti-male in some ways, and anti-masculinity. A lot of men are struggling with their own identity and trying to find their place in the world. And I typically work with two groups of guys who are in their 20s and just starting out, in their first real decade of adulthood. And then I have guys who come to me panicked and in crisis, usually around 38, 39, 40 to about 42. And, they're wondering what's going on. Why all of a sudden I'm doing everything I was told to do. And I have the house and the wife and the 2 children and the cat and the dog. And I have and I have everything, I have a great career. Why do I feel empty on the inside? So that's like my 2 groups of, main groups of guys coming in. So this topic to me is really important for really understanding, what men can do, especially because we're so isolated in our world today. And it's really, sad, it's a sad state of affairs when you think about like how isolated men really are and how they get. So that's why I appreciate you. And, just a little bit about what you do. I really appreciate the Man Effect and your work. I'd like for everyone to know that, you and I are friends, and the fact that, I don't know how you came up on my Facebook feed, but all of a sudden, like I see this thing about post about men, and then I loved your questions, and then I think we messaged each other, and then, we had a good connection there. So I really appreciate you. And I think that having you help me to, really, us working together and to understand their issues as well as what they can do about their issues. I think that this is going to be very helpful, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I really appreciate the acknowledgement there. So
yeah, you do great work, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Feelings mutual there for sure. So I guess, are we ready to jump in here?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it. So just as for a baseline, I think there's a lot of stigma specifically just around the word therapy. So I think it would be good to kind of define or break that down before we kind of move forward, just for the context of how you and I are perceiving this word.
Right. Well, therapy, I would imagine that, people have all their wild ideas about what it's like to go in to see a therapist, especially guys. I think maybe Dr. Phil kind of broke the mold there, and
Yeah.
back in the day, and I think there were others. Maybe Oprah had her own type of therapy going on with, her viewers, and
Hmm.
But if you really know those audiences, it's mainly women, and so the larger number of people that actually go to therapy are women. And a few years ago, I've had a history for guys who don't know who I am, and haven't seen some other videos. I worked in New York City for 20 years, starting out in my 20s, working with young people, especially young men caught up in the gang life.
Yeah.
And so I directly saw what was going on with these young men, and usually adolescent teenagers, and then young adult males. But there were also men who were older who were caught up in that life too, and
Sure.
often the ones leading the crime. It's kind of like dealing with the
Yeah.
mafia. So, and that was really part of my life for 20 years. And then I decided that, after kind of retiring from that work, I wanted to continue to take counseling to, I used to say it was coffee shop counseling. So, but I decided to go back and study, and then I eventually went off to the University of Oxford to study psychoanalysis and psychodynamic counseling.
Oh, okay.
And then I ended up in, coming back from England, and then ended up in Atlanta. And I had a general practice. I've worked in a hospital for a while, a mental health hospital, and then I had a general practice. And then all of a sudden, I was reading this article, and it kind of brought me back to my roots as far as working with men, because this article in the New York Times said, basically a good man's hard to find. And when it, you know, had that title, I was really interested in what was it talking about? And it was actually talking about therapy, and
Interesting.
about the whole profession of therapy, and you know all the statistics that we can come up with point to men having the bulk of the problems, like men being more men than women being incarcerated, more men than women committing suicide and being successful at it,
Mm.
if you can call that success. And then like um, having higher rates of alcoholism and drug abuse and drug use, and all the kind of problems that we have in our society. Yet the profession of counseling and psychotherapy is predominantly women. And I know this because when I go to conferences, I might be there might be a handful of men who are there, but it's we're way outnumbered by uh, female therapists. And,
Sure.
you know, I absolutely believe, a good therapist is a good therapist,
Yeah.
male or female. But this article basically said, that there was a crisis because, if you think about the number of men who want to go into, or the number of men who have problems, and then you think about the number of therapists who are predominantly female, that causes some sort of barrier there for a lot of men. They don't feel comfortable, and that often is a comment that I'll hear from uh, um, guys coming in to see me. So it's important to really recognize that we're going to therapy for men, because I think that it's a really important help, and a great way for men to really get some healing and some major change in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great background of kind of your angle and why you really care about men being in the realm of therapy. I think to just kind of recap too, though, like therapy takes a lot of different forms. And
Right.
it's not just necessarily sitting down with one-on-one. It could be group therapy. There can be all sorts of different avenues. So I would say on my end, I would define therapy as someone investing in themselves and just getting outside help. But there's obviously, I used to joke that I used to do man therapy by, building furniture and stuff. And I would just go in my wood shop and work on what I wanted.
I like that.
So
Maybe I'll join you. I need to do some man therapy, and I like building things too. I think that's pretty cool, you know?
yeah, but I mean, it's just that exploration of what helps you balance and strengthen internally, and finding what works for you in that realm. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. Like there's art therapy, there's music therapy, there's
Yeah,
equine therapy, you know. Um, I can't fit a horse in my office, so it's kind of hard, but you know, I love horses. Yeah, you know, I do, you know, encourage guys to bring their dogs as long as they're, you know,
sure.
not mean dogs, but you know,
Yeah,
so all kinds of therapy out there, and you don't have to come and just, you know, sit in a chair and talk to somebody, but
yeah,
sometimes it's necessary, and that,
absolutely.
you know,
I'm not discounting it. I just don't want
right.
the viewers to only have that tunnel vision of this is only what therapy is. Um, anyway, that was just
Oh yeah, no, that's good stuff. Yeah. I think a
so.
lot of guys have a preconceived notion that you know they'll have to. I remember one guy came in and he just sat there for a moment, and then he looked at me, and I was about to say something, and he goes, and then he stopped me and goes, "Is this where I start to, you know, bare my soul?" And I was like, "Well, we could have a little bit of, you know, I'm here, okay?" But it's like ready to, you know, bare his soul. I'm like, "Okay, well, you're ready. I can tell you."
He's ready to crack it open.
Right. Yeah. Like, so, you know, and of course, you know, I try to add some humor to our interactions. You know, I
Yeah,
know it's usually a very serious thing, but you know, I think laughter is therapeutic as well. So,
absolutely.
you
No,
know,
it is. It absolutely is. So I think it'd be good to bring in. You had sent me an article regarding therapy and men, and I think it'd be really interesting to kind of use that context to help us build towards where you wanted to head.
sure.
Could you just should we reference the article itself or just kind of
Yeah. If you, I think it's helpful. Um, you know, you have the technology over there, I guess. I don't know if you can bring it up if you saw the link
yeah,
that I shared with you, but
all
as you're
for the
doing
pod.
that, I'll talk about it a little bit. You know, it really did highlight the need for male therapists, and I think that, you know, when guys come up, and I can already hear in their voice some level of embarrassment, shame, or fear that I'm going to be some person that's going to judge them.
Mhm.
But then immediately there's a sense of relief when, you know, I actually talk to them and say, "Hey, you know,
Yeah,
I get it. There, you know, yeah, that's the article, and you know, I get it. You know, you have some issues, and I'm not here to judge. And let's
yeah,
just talk like two guys talking back and forth. Let's just, you know, hear about what's going on with you, so that, you know, maybe we can work together on digging a little deeper and figuring out, you know, what's happening." And that article, uh, where'd it go? It kind of disappeared. Or did you
I
want
just
to? Oh, you
I just
just want to
exited.
show it? Yeah,
I just wanted to show and give people a point of reference.
yeah, that works fine.
Okay.
You know, so you know, I once had a phone call with someone who was a head of a journal, a research journal, and it was a woman who was interested in the topic of men and male therapists, and she asked me, "Do you think that women, you know, can work with men?" And I said, "Absolutely."
Mm.
And I worked with female therapists myself and had a female therapist myself in the past.
Yeah, me too.
But I said, you know, like a lot of things, I can't describe to a woman what it is to have a menstrual cycle or be pregnant. And I think there are some natural limitations. And men feel more comfortable talking about their issues with other men. And I think that, you know, um, quickly, to my experience, the shame begins to dissipate once they realize that I'm not sitting there, you know, as a member of the opposite sex, thinking, well, you cheated or you did all these things, and
Mm-hmm.
and then chastise them. I'm actually open and listening to what happened, and just often I'll just say, tell me the story, and they begin to talk and tell their story, and things unfold, and they start to relax in the chair, and they start to open up, and then I actually begin to see guys process some of their real deep hurts and their real fears.
Mm.
And I think that's how the process usually begins. It's very natural and very easy.
Yeah. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
it's like, tell me where you're at right now. Just tell me what brought you in here, what's really going on.
Yep.
And usually they'll start with this, I was feeling this way or that way, or I experienced this or that. Like men tend to, feel probably a little bit more comfortable talking about sex with other men.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to, if they have issues with anger and aggression, they tend to feel more comfortable talking to a guy therapist about their anger and aggression.
Mm-hmm.
So it usually is because there's some level of understanding and a common language that we share and
Yeah.
understand, especially around emotions. So that's a big one. And then, when guys are struggling with a sense of identity or confusion about who they are, or, their values and what's going on with their lives, they often, need other men to kind of be like a guide for them. It's like, um, if you think about it, we all men look to other men to see where, what needs to be done in life, how do we handle life? And to the definition of therapy, to me, therapy is really about living life well. And in order to do that, we have to heal and we have to work through our issues. And so that's what therapy does. But it's really about living life well.
Mm.
And so guys tend to, want to talk about the deeper stuff that they go through.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, and to kind of just jump back to that article too, I thought what was really fascinating about the angle it made me more acknowledge is that as a society that we don't really encourage men or um, push men towards personal or inner development on that level. And it's like there's a lot of uh, belittling of men who either have emotional issues or need to get help to deal with emotional issues. I just thought that was a really, I think that point stuck out the most to me, honestly.
Absolutely. Our society has become, on both ends, I think men and women sometimes are the hardest on men. Um, you know, I think that our society has, on some level, with the label toxic masculinity, which you're going to hear a lot about from me, because I disagree with that
Yeah.
whole understanding of masculinity. I don't
Yeah.
see masculinity as toxic, and I don't want to pathologize men.
Mm-hmm.
I think that society wants to say that men have problems and men are the problem, and in reality, it does a lot to shame men. And so, who's going to want to go and get help, or to acknowledge help, that they need help, if society shames them? And so, you know, when I talk to guys and I say, look, you need to really work on these issues, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that we can work together. And you know what, these things that maybe you're 26 years old, or maybe you're 46 years old. It's not going to take 46 years to fix them.
Yeah.
You really invest in yourself right now, and I'm certain that within a year or so, or maybe 6 months, just real honest investment in oneself, that I see change. I see guys grow, and I see guys change, and I do believe in graduating guys
Mm-hmm.
once they are, it's time to move on. So,
Yeah.
but usually the fear is, or the resistance to going into therapy is that they have a fear to admit that they have problems. They'll be perceived as weak. Um, they also will have this type of shame phobia, which is a phobia. David Wexler writes about it, but it's a phobia of actually being shamed. So we anticipate being shamed so that we can avoid shaming situations, and
Mm.
then so we avoid any situation where we actually have to admit that we have problems or that we appear weak. So that's all about that shame phobia. And I think once guys get past that and realize that therapy isn't about shaming you, it's about healing and change. I think that they guys begin to do really well in therapy.
Mm. So it's kind of on some levels. I mean, people have different religious or whatever beliefs, but on like an evolutionary psychological level, it's being aware of your coping mechanism to exert being confident and tough, and not um, being influenced by shame has this kind of like weird effect on, or a negative effect on some people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So guys, they just get caught up in um, projecting out an image and then hiding behind that image. It's kind of like we have this
Mm.
shielding and we hide behind it, and then we look shiny on the outside, but on the inside we're really in a lot of pain and a lot of hurt.
Yeah,
So
interesting, man. Sorry, I'm just, my brain's thinking here.
that's all right. It's
Writing
good.
notes. So like what's a practical starting step for men who are kind of curious or just want to learn more about therapy and how it can just assist in their life?
Well, I recommend books a lot of times. I try to get guys to read. If you're not a big reader, use Audible. I promise I'm not getting any feed or kickbacks from
It's
Audible.
not an affiliate. No.
And it's not an affiliate, but I love Audible books, and so some really good books can help men in the beginning to just sort of identify their problems and identify maybe some tools that they can get to um, get some help around their problems. But let's be honest, the reason why I work with men in a therapeutic setting is because we can get this feedback loop within our own heads. And so reading a book or watching videos, and that can be very helpful, but sometimes we need something that will take us deeper into
Mhm.
who we are and where these wounds
Absolutely.
are.
Yeah.
So sometimes guys will say, well, I read this book or I did that and it didn't help. It's because we probably needed to dig a little deeper. It's the old adage is that it's sort of like peeling an onion. You see the layers in an onion, and
Yep.
that some guys will come in and they'll work on their anger for a while, and then they feel good and they're able to cope with situations. Then one day they get angry again. They go, well, why did I get angry? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
let's look a little deeper here. Maybe there's a deeper wound here, and what did you experience? Why did you experience that? And then why did you react? And what happened? And so therapy there is a beginning of that process. It's kind of looking inward.
Hmm.
And so books help. I recommend To Be a Man by Robert Masters. I also recommend The King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. It's all about male archetypes, and it kind of gives a good foundation for understanding men and masculinity and our roles and our sense of who we are as men. Um, you know, I think there are other things that guys can do, but ultimately, it's when they come into therapy that they can get to these deeper levels.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of anything else I would add. Just starting points. Reading's great. There are podcasts and YouTube channels out there
Right.
that are around mental health too. So like just a basic education for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously blogs like mine and yours.
Right.
And then just trying to think of anything else. I mean, there's probably some like group therapy type things out there as well that people could check out.
Yeah, there are
But
organizations out there they may not be therapeutic per se, but they can be very helpful. And I think it's important for guys to, look around and realize you don't have to be alone in this whole process. That,
No.
A lot of guys that I deal with who are, in the world of AA and NA, who are alcoholics or maybe dealing with drug addiction,
Uh-huh.
they're going to meetings and getting support there. And that helps me,
Yeah.
helps me when I'm working with them to send them there and maybe work with a sponsor. And
Yeah.
so, that's a big sort of support network for a lot of guys.
Yeah. I think that, and that follows into something that I really try to encourage guys too, is find good friends who are
Right.
wanting the personal development or long-term goals, or that are just similar to you in that aspect. They don't have to be the same type of person, but it's like my really good friends have been some of the biggest motivation and pushing points in the hardest times for me. So
Absolutely. There's nothing like a good set of friends, and that's a problem that a lot of men have nowadays is,
it is. Yes.
we're so unplugged from each other. I wrote an article a long time ago about socially networked isolation. And, it's kind of like we think we're connected through all of this social networking, but
Yeah.
um, we're really still isolated. And I tell guys, you need to get outside, go cycling with someone, go golfing with someone, go,
Yeah. Do
play
something.
baseball with someone, do something, rather than just stay home.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. So outside of all of that, like, why do you think, outside of the shame and all the practical things that men can do, why do you think men aren't are objective to, or object, like they don't want anything to do with therapy? Why do you think that is?
I think, you know, I was trained in, at Oxford University in England, and I was trained in psychoanalysis and psychodynamic counseling.
Okay.
And the problem with a lot of um, understanding of therapy is from an older model of therapy, which I don't adhere to, even though I was trained under it, which is,
Mm.
a guy comes in and he's talking, and you hear the therapist going, uh-huh, uh-huh, and just nodding his head, you know. And I've had scores of guys tell me that, oh my God, like they say, all this person did was basically let me talk, and I felt like I was talking to myself, and then I'd walk out scratching my head and going, what was the purpose of that session? Now, believe me, trust me on this, there is a purpose. And if they're suited for psychoanalytical work, then it's great. It really does dig in and get to some real deep stuff. But I actually, coming back from England and working with men, realize that men really need conversation. They need dialogue, but they need dialogue with a purpose. So therapy,
Yeah.
it's, they may be talking about their issues, but I'm listening to things that they're not saying. And I'm
Yeah.
also paying attention to their narrative and how they,
Body language and
right, they're everything. And so it's more than just, buddies at a coffee shop. It's, what's really happening to this person as they're talking, and what's really being revealed here. So I'll say things like, well, did you hear yourself say this? And what are you feeling right now? What's going on right now, inside you? And listen to your narrative. And so we start to really dig into how an individual experiences life and,
yeah.
experiences themselves in life. So, you know, um, my process basically is male friendly. I'm not here to judge. Again,
Yeah.
it has a lot of male affirming, uh, male positive stances, so that, again, I'm not here to pathologize someone and, turn them into some, masculine disease, um, which which I can't. It just blows my mind that people are into that. But I do believe in a process. So in my process, I work on a psychodynamic, underlying unconscious messaging, process, which means that I really want to get to the core, or the root pain
Hmm.
that a person's going through. And
Hmm.
so, whether they're having emotional issues with emotional wounds or a negative narrative, self-talk, self-limiting beliefs. Sometimes we get into inner child work, and then eventually we get into shadow work. And I'm not going to go into detail about those things
Sure.
right now, but
There's no time.
just to kind of talk about the unconscious mind, like what is buried in this unconscious. So if you take, let's just idealize, let's just think of a pyramid for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, pyramid shape. So how old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay. So if you think about consciousness and you use that pyramid as the totality of everything you've ever felt, thought, or experienced,
Mm-hmm.
you and I are in the last, 1 second, 3 seconds there in consciousness at the very tip of that pyramid. Now you've got 30 years of unconscious stuff stored away.
Yeah.
And so your consciousness is 30 years deep plus 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And guys go, why 9 months? Well, even in the womb, our mother's, um, emotional state of mind, and also anything she's done, like smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol or take drugs, any of that is an impact on our psyche and our
Yeah.
development. So, when I'm listening to guys, I'm listening not only to the current story that they're telling me, but I'm also listening to how did they get here, and how did they develop. And if it's a 30-year-old guy, I'm listening to 30 years of his development. And if it's a 50-year-old guy, I'm doing the same thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really getting into the deeper parts of the unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And often we forget things, or we don't realize that certain things in our lives have had a significant impact on shaping us and developing our personalities, and then tinting the world that we live in. So this sort of filter over our mind is that 30 years or that 58 years of life, and we have this particular perspective. And it's like this. I use a barracuda as an example. I don't know if you've ever seen a barracuda,
Mm-hmm.
but I was down in the Caribbean one time, and I swear I'd rather be surrounded by sharks. Um, it looked like an alligator with a fish body. And it was staring right at me. It was long. It was probably 6 feet long. And but these scientists, these researchers, took this barracuda and they put it in a fish tank, and it was swimming around, and they dropped some fish in, and then it went and ate up the fish. And
Mm-hmm.
then it was swimming around, and they came back and they took a glass pane and they cut the tank in half, and then they dropped the fish over on one side, and the barracuda was swimming around and kept banging the glass and kept trying to get to the other side and get to the fish, and it just kept bang bang bang, and it kept hitting its head, and eventually it would just swim around and kind of look at the fish. And after a while they took the pane of glass out, and all the little fish swam over to the barracuda and swam around its head, and basically the barracuda just looked at those fish and figured, well, I can't eat that, and literally starved and died. So that's classical conditioning, right? And when we interact with our world and we have all these experiences, we begin to believe that that's the way the world is. And so if we've had some experiences where maybe a parent was having depression when a child was being raised, and that child is experiencing the world through the eyes of a depressed parent, well, then the child learns that that's part of the world, and comes to expect those things. And that's all buried in the unconscious mind. So that's why we have to go in and really work through this in a psychodynamic way. That's how I work with men. And then eventually I use the hero's journey. I think we're going to talk about that in future shows. So
Absolutely.
I won't talk a lot about it, but it's really a good map for men. And it's really helpful for men to develop a sense of direction as far as their own self-development, their own self-initiation into manhood, and then really understanding the meaning of life and purpose of life. And then eventually we want to get to mastery, because that's
Yeah.
What therapy really is all about is to help guys to have a sense of mastery, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I get into cognitive behavioral skills, which are basically the coping skills, the communication skills, the life skills, the relationship skills. And so a lot of times I work with guys and I'll give them homework and things that they can do outside of, the therapy room. And sometimes they'll bring it back and say, hey, I practiced these skills and this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we discuss it, and then we kind of fine tune things. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like developing a toolbox. And then ultimately, they're growing and they're changing and they're getting healthier and healing these wounds. And, eventually, we may go into some life coaching at some point if they want to continue on for a short time. But again, like, my goal isn't to keep them in therapy. My goal is to help
Oh,
them
yeah.
move on. Right. But
Yeah.
it's part of a process. So, um, especially a lot of younger guys come because they like the life coaching aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then I have guys who are, CEOs of companies or, higher up on the command chain, and they're trying to have better relationships with, the people that they manage or the people above them. So, they get a lot of executive coaching after that through this. It's sort of the psychology of life coaching, and through the mind, through the mind and through the mental processes, so we kind of put all this into practice through the life coaching, and that's sort of where I take them in my process.
I love it. Well, we should probably bring it to a close here.
Right.
But yeah, I could talk about this for forever. That's why I'm just like, and I know you could too. I'm just trying to think of a good way to recap. I would just really encourage anyone who's watching, like, if this is something that you're interested in, don't just sit on it. Like, actually start taking action. Like, if finances are an issue, a lot of places out there do have assistance for people who
Right.
want therapy. Like, so it's not really an excuse. You could just ask around if anyone has a good therapist. I mean, there's lots of things you can do.
Right.
So I would just really encourage you, like, if you're watching and this seems like it's something you want to move forward in, just start doing. Write a little list, take little steps, and just start today. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times guys wait too long.
Yeah.
It's kind of our MO, right? It's like, I got an ache. Oh, it turns out to be cancer because we waited 6 years to fix it,
Yes.
right? So please don't wait too long.
Yes.
This stuff it's not worth more pain in your lives and more wrecked relationships and more hurt and even sometimes death when it comes to drugs or alcohol. Just, get help. And, if you're really worried about it or afraid of it, maybe get a friend to go with you, or, take you to the therapist, or, get a family member to help you.
Yeah.
Just don't delay. I think that's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree. Yeah, that's all I got. If you guys have enjoyed watching this show, if you think it is for someone, please feel free to share, comment, subscribe. You'd really help us out. And yeah, I just really appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah. Thank you guys. We welcome comments and
Yeah.
questions and ideas for shows. We definitely want to continue on and do this for your benefit out there. So, we definitely want to hear from you. So again, subscribe and share it with your friends. And, we're sort of new to this in this realm. So, we're just trying to give you some raw information right now, but it'll become more and more advanced and more in depth as we kind of build and work through this. So,
Yeah.
feel free to help us out by giving us some good questions. All right.
Yeah. We love questions.
Yes, we do.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more episodes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.